morning. Good to see you. Hope you're having a lovely day and a lovely weekend, a blessed Sunday at that. This is the Inside Politics. I am Akisa Wandera, sitting in for my colleague, Ben Kitili. A lot has happened on the political space, not just in the country, but one of the biggest elections ever seen in the United States. A change of guard there as Joe Biden takes it. What does this mean for us as a country? What does this change of guard mean for perhaps foreign policy for both countries, and how does it trickle down to Kenyans? Our panel will be taking a look at this and a number of other topical issues that have been making headlines on the mainstream media and the social media as well. Thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at who we have this morning. Major John Seii will be joining us. She's a development consultant. Thank you for joining us. Gloria Roba, youth and policy analyst, also joining us this morning. Dismas Mukua, political risk analyst. Hesbon Owila, political analyst. And finally, Mark Bichachi, communication strategist. Gentlemen and ladies, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Let's start with a big story that we've seen this week. A fresh twist has now emerged in the BBI report-making process after a member of the task force disowned some of the proposals in the document, alleging that they were sneaked into the final document. Major retired John Seii claims they were rushed into signing the final document without being given time to go through and affirm its contents. Jeff Kirui starts our program at this hour with that story.
All of those regions.
In what could raise credibility concerns on the Building Bridges Initiative report, a member of the task force, Major retired John Seii, has claimed that some of the proposals were sneaked into the final report, which was submitted to President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga. Among them, the proposal to increase the number of members of parliament by 70 and 47 women to Senate to total 94.
So it took us by surprise when the question of constituencies was brought up and was sort of confirmed by those who went to Naivasha. Wherever we went in this country, 47 counties, there was something that was very clear in our mind: hatutaki kuongeza muziko.
And even though he's among those who appended their signatures to the final document, he argues that they were not given time to go through the report.
Under normal circumstances, you don't sign a document that carries such weight without going through it. But because senior people were present and they assured us that everything is okay, so we took for granted that we will sign the document.
Major retired Seii raising concerns that the process has been hijacked by politicians after the Naivasha retreat meeting of members of parliament, which entirely represented the proponents of the BBI report.
We felt that that fell through the of the BBI spirit. Inclusivity was meant to bring everybody on board, discuss it, and agree together.
Meanwhile, a splinter group of the Pastoralist Parliamentary Group, led by Senate Majority Leader Samuel Pogisio, has declared support for the BBI document.
I believe pastoralists support the BBI process.
This is after another group led by Mandera Governor Ali Roba, former Majority Leader in the National Assembly Aden Duale, gave 11 demands as a reducible minimum if they are to support the BBI report.
If there is any amendment that we'll call for it after the elections of 2022, not now.
Their Western counterparts, led by National Assembly Majority Whip Emmanuel Wangwe, say they will drum up support for the document in the region.
And we have agreed we're going to working with other leaders to come up with strategies in our area to popularize this document.
The roadmap to a BBI referendum has kicked off after the Naivasha retreat. The process of collecting 1 million signatures runs until December, and its verification done by January next year. Jeff Kirui, KTN News.
Well, this was huge this week, seeing one of the members there, retired Major John Seii, come out saying that perhaps a number of the things that are really contentious in this particular report were sneaked in last minute without the blessing of the task force. Let's hear what our panelists have to say. And I think on this one, I'll have to start with you, Jero. because perhaps maybe you might have some inside info for us with one of the key members of this particular task force coming out and saying that, you know, some of the key issues like additional 70 seats, 47 other seats for women at the Senate were not part of what Kenyans really wanted and part of what the task force put in. Once again, casting aspersions on whether really this process is a common mwananchi process. Where do you come from with this? How do you look at it?
Thanks very much. I was wondering whether you were going to call me first, because apparently the entire country believes that I am my father's advisor, and yet I'm not. I think I really go on the record as somebody who has stood up strongly and clearly against the BBI, both the process and the content. And actually, Major retired John Seii, who also happens to be my father, is very aware of my position on the BBI. And so it was with surprise, because I learned, along with so many of you, after he had appeared on that one radio station, that he had issue with how the process was rushed and that they were forced to append their signatures. And for that, I say it is his democratic right to speak up and speak out. I think for me, what has been more important, as I have watched the vitriol fly back and forth on social media and so on and so forth, it has actually reminded me, if somewhat ironically, of the fact that, you know, BBI is supposed to be looking at issues of hostility, building bridges. It's supposed to be a peacemaking process. It's supposed to be reducing ethnic antagonism. And what I have seen for myself this week is there is nothing that, especially when it comes to politics, that one can say without being lumped into a particular political space. So, for example, from time immemorial, despite the fact that the deputy president until recently had blocked me on social media, that I am an operative of Tanga Tanga, I also see that Major retired John Seii has also been labeled as an operative of Tanga Tanga. You know, if we are going to reach a point as Kenyans where our political views and opinions are somewhat or somehow sequestered into a space that straitjackets us ethnically, then indeed we have a lot of work to do as Kenyans. You know, it makes me think of people like...
Yes, let me just cut you short. Let me just cut you short on that. We've seen Paul Mwangi also, you know, speak on this issue. In fact, he's the one who's doing the responses for this particular task force on this, saying that Major retired Seii is lying, that in fact he has not been for this document from the word go. So now we're at a point of his word against Major Seii's word. What do you say on that?
I saw the thread, the Twitter thread that Paul Mwangi wrote, and surprised at his tone of voice and his hostility and angry words. You see, I was never there in any of those deliberations, and I think the only two people who can duke it out, so to speak, and discuss it would be Paul Mwangi and Major Seii, if you call them and let them have a discussion, because what you will see now is accusation being hurled back and forth. And, oh, he's lying, he's dishonest, he's an operative, he's an insider. And I think this is all part of the counterattack, because I think it was highly unexpected that a so-called insider, and by the way, my father, Major retired John Seii, is a big proponent of BBI. From the very beginning, throughout our debates, he has said this is a good thing for the country. The handshake is a good thing for the country. And we have spiritedly agreed on the matter. So ultimately, if Paul Mwangi accuses him of lying, it has to be a conversation, therefore, between Paul Mwangi, Major Seii, the rest of the committee. They need to sit and meet and discuss. But if he wants to prove the speed with which they were forced to sign, then that is a matter that should be open to public scrutiny.
Fair enough, fair enough. Let's hear from the others. Mark Bichachi, how are you looking at this? On the public eye, it's a matter of politicians using members, you know, to drive their own agenda on this particular BBI issue. These revelations by Major Seii now bringing in the cracks. This process has already been a very contentious one. So with this latest revelations from Major Seii, which way BBI then? How do Kenyans trust a process that is divisive, even within the committee members?
You know, what is amazing about our political class is they will always cause chaos and then claim that that chaos has self-caused, and then let us discuss this chaos as though they are innocent. Let me put it in perspective. This is the perspective. Paul Mwangi, we all know who he represents. We know who Ambassador Kimani represents. And the president told us that there were people selected by Raila Odinga, there were people selected by William Ruto, and there were people selected by himself to this task force. Now, the question has to be asked, and I'm not implying that this is the case, but as a strategist, I have to ask myself, who gains the most from the statements that came from Major General Seii? So as a political analyst, I have to tell you that definitely those statements would be directly associated with Tanga Tanga, because that is what makes strategic sense. As they say in English, that if it walks like a duck, looks like a duck, and begins to quack like a duck, you will be foolhardy not to conclude that indeed it is a duck. So this particular strategy, the conspiracy theorism that is going to abound shortly around BBI, will definitely be to the benefit of the Tanga Tanga movement and the Tanga Tanga side. And that is just the simple bare knuckle analysis that you can do. There is no other way I can look at it other than this being a political move and Paul Mwangi reacting similarly politically. Now, the difficulty is, who would we believe? Major General Seii or Paul Mwangi? Because at this point, it is his word against his word.
You begin by saying that, and I'd really like Hezbon to get in on this, that, you know, a lot of these members were handpicked. The president picked his, Raila Odinga, former prime minister, picked his, deputy president said to have picked about 3 members of this particular committee. Then is this where our problem begins, Hezbon? The way you look at it, that politicians and the top leadership itself picked their own people and are reading from different scripts. Is this the genesis of our problems?
I don't think that's the genesis of our problem. I think the genesis of our problem is that we perceive politics in almost everything that is done. Major General Seii might be talking from a personal conviction, but I think the problem we have is that we always pigeonhole people along certain political lines and possibly look at who is likely to benefit from what political actors are saying, and then we associate people along that thread. Now, if you ask me, was there any other way we were going to do this? No. I mean, the handshake was between President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. So this is something that they had to take the initiative from the beginning and pick people to be in this committee. And the people who are picked to be in this task force were picked on merit. I mean, these are Kenyans who have distinguished themselves from different, backgrounds, from the chair who was a long-serving, a provincial administrator, to Major General Seii with enough experience, and all the people in that task force. You can actually say that there was a lot that they were bringing on the table. Mm-hmm. And I think from where I sit, it's not a question of who says against the words of who.
All right.
We just need to go back and ask ourselves, why did we get ourselves here? President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga shook hands. They identified 9 key things that they thought, if they were addressed, would unite this country, would be a lot more inclusive, would enjoy something called, economic benefits of the nation, trickling down to everyone. Mm-hmm. So if we just go back to those things and look at the BBI report and say, does this report reflect the 9 agenda items that they identified? If the reports identify those 9 items, and there is fidelity to addressing those 9 items, it should not be a question of what someone says.
All right.
Now, the BBI is a big thing, and it's going to attract a lot of contention. And fidelity to what the BBI was supposed to do should be our bone of contention. That whatever Major General says, whatever Lawyer Paul Mwangi is saying, can we now put this together and go back to what was the BBI supposed to do? Each item in the BBI, how do you trace it back to the 9 issues that were raised to be sorted? So if one of the most contentious one that he raised, for instance, is the question of 70 more members of parliament. And I think it has been in the media that these members of parliament will be distributed in a way that many people perceive to be favoring one region as opposed to the other regions. What we need to ask ourselves is, what is the basis of those 70 members and how are they going to be distributed?
All right.
And how is it going to address the issue of representation and inclusivity? And I think from where I see it, that is something that can be done scientifically, because there is a population index that determines a constituency, which is around 133 members. So we don't contend along political lines, because those lines will be formed.
Okay.
And we don't shape our interpretation of this along political lines, because we have the 9 agenda items.
Well, it's a political process, as Bond, and from the word go, everyone has looked at it. A lot of people, and especially in the political space, have looked at this using political lenses. But let's hear from Gloria, because what Major Seii was saying are some of the issues that a lot of Wananchi are struggling to contend with, the issue of additional seats. Major Seii clearly says that it was very clear in their minds, even when they were going to counties, that they do not want to add the burden on Kenyans. Yet, the report does exactly that. Gloria, how do you analyze this? And looking at it from a young people's perspective, are Kenyans getting a raw deal on this process?
Thank you so much, Akisa, for having me on the show today. First of all, I want to comment on the fact that Major Seii has been very independent in her thinking and has been clear that she's not the one influencing her father, Major Seii, on the things that he's coming out to inform us. So I want to give that one to her. That is a clear example of how the youth and the youthful people can finally influence the senior citizens of this country. But to your question on what I think about this situation, we all agree, from Mark Bichache to Hezbollah Owila and Major Seii, we are all saying that, you know, at the end of the day, it's going to be his word against his word. And this is where the rain started beating us. Because the problem with the setup of this initiative is that there was no transparency. There was no transparency there was no legal structure. There was no transparency in how that task force was actually put together. We are hearing rumors that came from the lounge in Bomas that apparently the deputy president was involved in picking his people and so was involved. But really nobody knows how this task force was put together. There's actually even no transparency on what next. You understand what I mean? So at the end of the day, because of that lack of transparency, we end up having, you know, all these rumors of people feeling like maybe their role, the part that they were supposed to play was maybe, you know, sidelined, because really there's no structures. So for me, the Building Bridges initiative, as I've said it over and over again, for me, it is really in the spirit of conmanship. The 9 points that we were trying to say, we are trying to solve. The first one being divisive politics. When you look at what the Building Bridges initiative has actually done to us, from the one, has it taken a year or about 2 years since its inception? It has been more divisive than it has actually brought Kenyans together. In fact, to an extent where we have those who support the initiative and those who are against. And even when you come out to talk about matters that should really just be looked at on an issue base, like Major Seii has come out to say that he was rushed, he was hurried. They told him, you know, you have to sign this thing because they have to print copies for Bomas Lounge. So because he believed in the process and he believed that everyone in there was there for, you know, with good intent, he actually signed in trust. And these are things that he has said out in the public. So at the end of the day, you can't even, we are not even being objective about the issues that are now rising, about the issues on transparency. The moment someone says, I don't think, personally I've said, this Building Bridges initiative does not address the youth agenda. The youth were not part of the Building Bridges initiative. We were not part of the task force. We really pushed to be brought to the table. Eventually, when we were brought to the table, it was actually selected few and they pushed whatever agenda, but not necessarily the agenda for the youth. But when we speak about these things, immediately, you know, you hear people, Kenyans branding, you know, now Gloria, we on the Tanga. The same way now they are branding Major Seii and Major Seii that they are actually Tanga sycophants.
All right.
So I think At the end of the day, Akisa, what we should be discussing, as Hesbon has said, is if indeed the drivers of this initiative are honest on what they're trying to achieve, then let them address the matters that Major Seii has brought on the table, and let them stop trying to say now this is a tanga-tanga keleweke thing.
Well, fair enough on the branding. Let's hear from Dismas on this. Let's hear your voice on this, Dismas. And perhaps even as we're talking about the back and forth and the he said, she said in this particular committee, let's remember that the latest containment measures, part of it is that the ban on political gatherings and the blow this has on the BBI rallies for or against, looking at the window for town hall meetings as well, even as you respond to, Major Sei's accusations or confessions, for lack of a better word, that we have opened up the window for town hall meetings for the BBI. What direction then does it mean this is taking? Dismas.
Well, a number of issues have been raised of great concern, and we should urge our panelists to use diplomatic language in this show. Like, for instance, how do you brand BBI as a product of conmanship, and in the same statement you indicate that you actually wanted to participate in the same program? How does that work out? I think it's important to respect institutions created to take Kenya to the next level. But when you address the issues raised by Major Seii, we need to ask ourselves a number of questions. First of all, for the people who know Major Seii, know him as a former military man, a respected Kenyan, and somebody who values a signature. So the question arises, why would he sign on a document whose content he does not fully support, or whose content he has not fully socialized? Because, he says he was rushed into signing a document. Why was he in a hurry to sign a document if he was not happy with the content? So that's the second question. Then another question is, between Major Seii and Paul Mwangi, who do we believe? Who among the two has come up with statements consistent with the aspirations and interests of BBI? Is it Major Seii? Is it Paul Mwangi? But when you look at it from the global angle, when you look at the substance over form, the question we need to be asking ourselves is, are the contents of the BBI report consistent with our national aspirations and our global interests? If it's consistent with what Wanjiku and Mora gave to the BBI team, so be it. For me, I've seen a number of committees in Kenya, commissions in Kenya, when one member says that is not unhappy, or rather when the one member is not happy with the content, then they will not sign on the dotted line. So if the moment you've signed on the dotted line, you've placed your signature on a document, then it means it's a good document to go. But we need to ask ourselves whether Mora's interest and Wanjiku's interest are captured. Now, when Major says that when they set off from Nairobi, they knew at the back of their minds they didn't want additional constituencies. But what if it's Mora wants those constituencies? What if it's Wanjiku wants those constituencies? Why should we place a burden on any other person apart from Wanjiro's interest or Mora's interest? So in my view, this issue of BBI who said what doesn't really matter. We need to ask ourselves whether or not the product is consistent with our aspirations as a nation, whether the content in the product we've been given can assist us solve the public violence we have every day. The rest of the issues are going to be details.
All right, I'd like to give each panelist about 30 seconds on right of replies, because you've thrown a lot of stuff around on each other. So let's start with Jerotich. The biggest question now is, why would Major Seii sign on something that he did not read? Even as you respond, perhaps maybe you'd know why he found himself in such a situation and why it took him long to, come out and speak on this.
Thank you very much. And it was interesting to listen to Dismas, because I think he's not incongruent. The wishes of Wanjiku, Mora, and so on. I think what I understood from listening to his interviews, both on this station and on some other radio station, he basically said that they were under pressure to sign. I think he has been very clear. And if people took the time beyond their initial knee-jerk reaction of why do you sign and so on and so forth, you would hear the process that he underwent and the pressure that they had to sign because something had to happen the following week, which was the launch of the report. That said, I really want to say that I have gotten the sense that Kenya is a very very, very fractured country. A lot of healing is required. You see, my issue will never change around the BBI, because for me, the BBI ultimately poses an existential threat to the people of Kenya. And for me, my role, my space as a Kenyan is to defend the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya.
Right.
And if we really want to deal with hostilities that arise on a regular basis, the only one thing that should ever have happened would have been the reform of the IEBC, because it is electoral injustice that triggers this high-octane hostility. And just to end, Akisa, I think what we must move beyond are the issues of whether we are ethnically aligned or not. We should see ourselves as Kenyans. I see myself only as a Kenyan. My ethnic background is important, yes, from a cultural standpoint, but I am patriotic Kenyan, and that will never change.
Fair enough, fair enough, Joe. Fair enough. Let's give the others some time to just respond to that. We have about 3 minutes to go on a break. So we really need to keep it tight. Hesbon, your thoughts?
I think, Akisa, you raised something very interesting, that the BBI is in itself a political process, which we all agree, because it originated from political chaos. It was initiated by political players. But one thing that I guess Kenyans want to be very careful about is that in politics, we don't follow politicians, but the politicians' ideas content. We need to look at what are the issues here, and to what extent are these issues contending to address the 9 agenda items. A focus on the issue will lead us to follow the politicians who are addressing the issues that are sorting the 9 issues that were identified.
Yes, Mark Bichachi.
I want to agree with Jerotich when she says that this country is fragmented. Indeed, it is, which is why the BBI is not simply a report. It is a conversation. It is a conversation you must all have with the soberness that is required. Hating it from the get-go, not participating in it from the get-go, and then coming out and saying it is not inclusive because you refuse to participate on it is not fair. Secondly, it is the responsibility of any member of a task force not to wait for the last minute to sign the document, but for them to be part and parcel of the process. I happen to be a board member. I'm given papers to sign all the time. Our job is to make sure that we are part of the process and not the signatures at the end.
Right. Gloria, this must begin by saying that you can't say you are not part of a process that you have branded political conmanship. I'd like to hear what you have to say on that.
You know, it's 2020 and we are in progressive politics. So we are now woke enough to know that we are not going to coin our politics in nice words and call it whatever. When you're out using an initiative to deceive the people, that is conmanship. So when I'm talking about conmanship, I'm very clear in my head what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that we are supposed to be uniting this country, and yet some of those suggestions that are in there are actually just playing a divisive role. I'm talking about the fact that when someone says, I refused to participate in this initiative, first of all, that is conmanship. When I try to get into to give my views, when I try, I've written articles about youth inclusion, I've done a lot of things. I tried to participate, but I was put out. And then, you come and say you refuse to participate.
So is it about you?
For me, it's my 30 seconds. For me, that is deceiving the people in public that the youth are refusing to participate in a process. So that is why I'm calling it conmanship. And those are my views. Richard, you have to let me finish. Those are my views.
All right. Bichachi, what point are you trying to make so that I let Gloria finish?
Now she's made it personal, that because she wasn't given a job, now she's not supporting BBI.
No. Because the youth. No, my job as a citizen. My job as a citizen and as a passionate.
All right.
No,
I'll need to give Dismas at least 10 seconds. Dismas, keep it very short. So then, which way BBI from where we sit now and all the divisions from the committee to Kenyans and the political class? Which way do we go?
Akisa, let's have a few things in perspective first. That when BBI started, the two architects, President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, invited all Kenyans to present their positions. They ignited a conversation and said, any single Kenyan with an idea, with anything, bring it to the table. Now, you cannot fail to bring your issues to the table, and then at the end of the day, you say that this is a horrible product. It's a product of conmanship. and use all unsavory words and language on a process that you ignored right from the word go. Every single Kenyan was told there is going to be a BBI meeting at some place. Please give your views. For the people who feared physical meetings, they were told to send soft copies. So you cannot fail to participate in a process. Then at the end of it all, you go to the top of Mount Kenya or you go to Mososho, you say this product is a waste of time and you did not participate. But now making progress, it's important for President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga to open a small window for anybody who has divergent views or somebody who has been left out to add their views, provided it doesn't compromise on the time frame.
All right. I'd like you to wrap it up on that. I want us to take a quick break. It's important for the President and Raila Odinga to open up a window for more consultations. Will they do that? It's a matter of wait and see. But what are your thoughts watching as you watch us from home? Text us on 22155, tweet us at Akisa Wandera at KTN News KE. The hashtag to use is Inside Politics. When we get back, President Uhuru Kenyatta is expected to address the nation next week on Thursday. He's likely to take stock on the Big Four agenda. Also, of course, route for the Building Bridges initiative. And of course, status on COVID-19 response and where we are as a country economically. We'll be back with our panelists to look at what was said in the last State of the Nation address and what are our expectations for Thursday. Stay with us. You're watching Inside Politics.